Welcome to Parsha VaYera. And we'll start with a prayer, which is the merging of the heavens and earth, which is very much what this Parsha is about in very many ways. L'shemikud kedusha bihu ushinate bi'ilu imulaya chemyukid bavavke b'yida ashlam b'shem kozriel kolam. Amen. Oh, this is a powerful Parsha. It's really the completion of the 10 trials of Abraham and the full meaning of the word Sarah. And I'm going to just say it right now. Sarah is used in meaning is when somebody's completely liberated on all levels. And at 127 years, which is when she left her body during this Parsha, she left fully liberated. Sarah. So think about that as a word. Sarah means fully liberated. Now, I have a very deep connection about Abraham, and this is like the completion of his 10 trials. Now, first, last week, we started with Lek Laha. What is that? Go to the self. Go to the truth of who you are. Go to your promised land. Yeah, and it's not an accident we're moving to Israel. So, so there's a little connection here. And this week, it starts out again. Abraham is in the 3rd day of circumcision. He's been circumcised. He's 99 years old. Who does that at 99 years old? The one who does that is someone completely committed to the divine. Completely committed to the divine will. And God's speaking to him. And this is what God's saying. So you got to do it. Complete certainty, complete clarity that this is what needs to be done, the blood sacrifice. And really, the shamanic energetics. Because we really need to understand that in the complete path of liberation, fully, it does include the shamanic level. And here we are. He is circumcised himself, offered his blood to God as a covenant. That's pretty heavy, okay? I mean, think about that one for a second. Okay, so now we go to the next step. He's 30 days in the post-circumcision. He's sitting in the opening of his tent in the heat of the day. What are we talking about? Okay, he's in divine revelation. That's part of what we're talking about. And what's the heat of the day? It's the awakening of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Kundalini. It's full force, and it's hot, and it's powerful, and he's waking up. And in the midst of it, 3 strangers come up. It's like, what? 3 strangers? And he interrupts it. Now that's quite a statement, because it is a statement that Abraham makes up throughout his life to open the door to receive everyone. Now, my connection with Abraham, and he's also a boundary crosser. When God spoke to him, Lek Laha, go to the self, he crossed the river, the Euphrates, and goes to the self, both physically to the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, but also going inward to the self. The first to integrate the outer God with the inner God. And a huge break with idol worship. What's idol worship? It's not just, okay, his father was an idol maker, Tarak, but the point is, he understood that was meaningless. But idol worship is being focused on what's outside of you as the truth, rather than what's inside of you. Think about that for a second. Think about how our world is living today. It's all about what's outside of us. No. The message of Abraham, be the boundary crosser, right? Go within, Lek Laha, go to your holy land as well, which is inside and as well as outside. Abraham actually appeared to me first at the age of 8 when I saw men in white as he appeared, and then he appeared in 1973 with 2 other great spiritual masters that are like kind of masters in another plane. And then finally, in my introduction to Israel in 2008, I spent 3 days in the desert and the Negev, overlooking the town of Rad, overlooking the Dead Sea. And I was in this half cave. In other words, I was exposed the whole 3 days. And I was without food and water. So let me explain what that means, because just before I went, someone actually died of dehydration 1 day in the desert without water. So here I am doing this 3 days, and suddenly I'm kind of in this half cave, and it's at night. I have a little fire going, and I hear bells and of goats and things. It's like, wait, there are no goats here. There's no sheep here. What is going on? And then the image of Abraham appears, and I'm talking about a real image, a real figure, and he just stood there in silence, but communicated to me 2 key things: the universal love for all humanity, which is part of this story today, and the boundary crosser energy, and his prayer was the first prayer listed in the Torah, which is the prayer for Sodom and Gomorrah, the prayer of upliftment of all humanity. So we have universal love, opening to God in all directions, the prayer for uplifting even of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is really a message to uplift all humanity. And those that, for me personally, have been tremendous motivations in my life. And this was this was an energetic communication. That's the best I can say it. Nonverbal, energetic, and then after a minute or so, he just disappeared. So this is kind of the deeper message of Abraham, what I just shared. Again, boundary crosser, crossing the Euphrates, going beyond the limits, which is what is needed for liberation. Love for all of humanity, prayer for all of humanity, walking before God as a blessing to all humanity. That's Abraham. That's what this Parsha is about. So that's why I'm bringing it up. This is what this Parsha is about. Wow! It's a little mind-blowing. And that actually, in all the biblical figures, he's the one I'm most connected to for these reasons. I mean, because he definitely impregnated me with his consciousness. Okay, his liberation consciousness. And he does have 10 trials he has to go through before liberation. Okay, so here we are, heat of the day, force of Kundalini, Ruach HaKodesh is going real hot, and 3 strangers show up. He doesn't know they're angels, they're 3 strangers. And he immediately pulls out of that to serve them. How can I serve you? What an interesting question in the midst of divine revelation on the 3rd day of circumcision. Okay, this is the shaman speaking, and this is the liberated being speaking at the same time. Wow, okay? And they turn out to be the angel Raphael, who completes his healing of the circumcision and actually helps liberate the healing of Lot. Angel Gabriel, which helps with the healing of Lot. And Michael, who announces that Sarah, his wife, at 89 or really 90 years old, is going to get pregnant. It's like, wow, that's a little unbelievable. Another miracle. Sarah actually laughs. It's like, wow, right. So anyway, Abraham offers them the food and hospitality, and they sit under a special tree, and the tree spreads out and it covers these people. This tree is kind of magical. We call it kind of magical tree of life. And what it is that it spreads for those people who are holy. So he already knew these were holy people. Not quite, again, so clear that knew that they were angels. So one angel, Michael, gives the prophecy about Sarah getting pregnant. She laughs. She gets in a little trouble for that. And they go, what do you want? I'm 90 years old. You think I'm going to have a kid? But nevertheless, the angel says, next time when I see you, you will have a child. So then they go off to Sodom. There's really 5 cities there, Sodom and Gomorrah, and as most people know it, and Abraham is told they are going to destroy the city. He pleads for it. Remember, Abraham is about uplifting the whole world no matter what is going on. Okay, and that's how I look at what's going on in the United States today. No matter what's going on, still praying for the upliftment of the United States, upliftment of Israel, upliftment for the whole world, okay? That's very Abrahamic. That's how I try to live my life. So, and he prays, and nevertheless, in just a second, Sodom and Gomorrah and 4 of the cities are immediately destroyed. The 5th one gets about a few hours before it's destroyed. Zoar. Okay, so Abraham prays. Doesn't seem to work, but he still gets up and he prays again, and he's in the field of Mamre. And what happened is according to, let's say, different the Tanakh and the Talmud, is that his prayer preserved Lot and the messianic seed, energetic seed that Lot is carrying. Okay, now the 2 of the angels go down, and Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's really, really corrupt, okay, on every level. And like we've had warnings today, 19 years ago, and perhaps we're in the 19th year of the second warning. God is saying, wake up, pay attention, return to God. They have no interest in doing it. So the angels come, and Lot takes him into his home, and everybody wants to sodomize these men, and he doesn't allow it. And more than that, the angel puts his hand out, and everyone's blinded. And then basically, the angels say, this is going to, all the towns here are going to be destroyed, Sodom and Gomorrah, and you got to leave. Well, Abraham's 2 son-in-laws don't want to leave. They make fun of it. They miss the point. This is kind of what we're seeing today too. People not seeing the big picture. And Lot's wife and his 2 virgin daughters leave with them. Basically, he didn't want to leave either, but the angels are pulling him. I mean, it's just hard to get the big picture, because it's kind of beyond our understanding. It's beyond our belief system for most people. We're not ready to have that expansion of consciousness, that prophetic consciousness. That's kind of what we're facing. But nevertheless, they leave, but then, and they're told, don't look back. So that's symbolic. Why? Because looking back means you get stuck in the past. Now, Lot's wife does that and turns to a pillar of salt. Okay, now, one thing that needs to be said with that is that we do have to look back to clear the past, but we don't want to get stuck in the past. So like my work with 0 Point, it's clearing the egoic patterns of the past so we can be free to be in the present. So it's a little different than having your whole present life determined by the past and being stuck there. And then after all this destruction, they make it to Zoar, where because Lot didn't think he could go any further, and then they rest. They go to the mountains, and now they think that's the end of the world because everything's been destroyed in their universe. And so the daughters think, well, we're just we need to repopulate the world. So they, on 2 successive nights, they get Lot drunk, and they get pregnant. Now, the teachings are subtle. It's like, wait, this is incest. But it's not really considered incest because of the consciousness of where the daughters were at, which is to help save the world. And the first is Moab, and that's the oldest daughter, and that's the energy of Ruth that ultimately becomes the energy of the Messiah. And then the second is Ben-Ami, the energy of Ammon, okay, like Ammon Jordan type thing. Now, what's important here, in a subtle way, is how can it be that the energy of the future Messiah comes from what we would call incest, and it's like, and drunken, and what the subtle teaching is, and that's what we have to talk about, what the subtle teaching is that the messianic energy is somewhat protected from the dark forces because it appears to be so much on the dark side. It slips through. So that's a little bit what the subtlety of how this comes about, as again, Moab to Ruth as the precursor to King David and ultimately the Messiah. Okay, so Sodom and Gomorrah, it's all destroyed. And it's after that Abraham and Sarah migrate to Gerar. And at this point, she's actually pregnant. But nevertheless, Amalek, the king, sees she's very beautiful, even at 90, and that he wants to marry her. But when he tries to get even close to her, everything shuts down. All the wombs of the women shut down, and so forth and so on. And he gets, this is above my head. Here, go back to Abraham. I realize he's not really your sister, but he is your husband. Now, just to be technically correct, she actually is his sister by another mother, same father, by another mother. She's also born, so she's like his half sister. Okay, in that process. So, but nevertheless, they continue. A lot goes on, and there's a treaty made, and Yitzhak is born. Now Ishmael, so Hagar, is really born 13 years sooner because Sarah couldn't have children, and the custom of the time that if you can't have children at a certain point, then the handmaid can. With Abraham, and he agrees. But he's pretty attached, and also Hagar isn't just anybody. She is actually an Egyptian princess that became part of their whole system when they had gone down into Egypt before Abraham and Lot split. So just kind of say, here's an Egyptian princess. This isn't just anybody here. But Ishmael, who's 13, is Sarah sees as really jealous of the young boy, and Sarah is very concerned about, well, who's going to be the next step in this, and she wants her son Yitzhak to be that. So she has them sent away. It's very difficult for Abraham. He really likes Hagar. And later, after Sarah leaves her body, Hagar comes back with a different name, transformed spiritually to another level, and they do get married, and they actually have more children. So all that is kind of part of the story, but I won't focus on it so much right now, because the story is about Abraham here and about God. So Yitzhak is growing up, and Abraham has many trials and tribulations that are going on, 10 total. I'm not going to go through all 10, but the final one is called the Akedah, and the offering. So Yitzhak is 37 years old. He's not a little kid like the story makes you think. He's 37. Sarah's 127, and Abraham's 137. So we have 37, 127, and 137. So the Akita is the offering. God says you must offer your son. No, he didn't say that. Take that back. You must bring your son to the offering. There's a play in words here that's very important. It didn't say you actually have to sacrifice your son. Just bring him to the offering. And so they do their 3-day march, and they go to Mount Moriah, really, and Yitzhak says, "Oh, where's the offering?" And Abraham says, "You'll see." So they get the wood, they do this, and he gets the knife, and he's tied Yitzhak down. Now, Yitzhak's 37 years old. He could have easily have chosen to say, "Dad, look, I don't think so." But he didn't, because they represent very important forces. Abraham represents Hesed, loving kindness. Yitzhak represents boundaries, clarity, severity, Gevurah. And in their interaction, they switch polarities. Abraham, because he's going to make this offering, becomes Gevurah, and Yitzhak becomes Hesed. Why? Well, he's willing to play. He's willing to have this happen. But in the moment, the angel comes, and Abraham's crying, the angel is crying, and the tears from the angel are coming down and into Yitzhak's eyes, and the angel says, "Stop." And Abraham says, "Okay, good, thank God." It's not an easy thing. And there's a ram caught in the bush, and they sacrifice that ram. And all this is the 10th final trial. What does that say about spiritual life? It's not necessarily safe, secure, and easy. The path to liberation requires going into the nothing. As I mentioned in my book, Into the Nothing. It requires going beyond safety and security. It requires jumping into the unknown. It's like, this is not easy. This really isn't easy. And liberation isn't for the meek. And Abraham he's all these things. He's a spiritual warrior. He confronts Nimrod, the main globalist at that time. In fact, I think he hid for Nimrod for like 19 years or something, because he was confronting the whole idol worship and Nimrod's energy as he was God, which I covered in the last Parsha. And this is very difficult. The Akita was extremely difficult emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Now, during this time, Sarah hears about it, and she leaves her body. It's like, this is too much. Now, people have different opinions, but again, she leaves complete. She leaves in a liberated state. That's why I mean the word Sarah is important. And at the same time that she leaves in a liberated state, Rivka is born, who will replace Sarah. So there's shifting of the Shekinah energy, the sacred feminine. Rivka is born as a relative, and ultimately she marries Yitzhak, and the tent of Sarah, which had gone black, lights up. So there's a continuum here. And without this, in a sense, one can say, well, what did Abraham really know? Well, was this sacrifice really going to happen? Maybe, maybe not. Because it's like, how indeed is there a lineage, and that his children will be like the stars? How can that be if he's sacrificing his only son? And it's, so maybe he didn't. Maybe he didn't absolutely think this was going to happen, but he was willing to go through it. And so what do we learn from this? Well, liberation requires certainty, and to be a spiritual teacher requires certainty. He's required to do this, 10 trials. We all go through trials. It's just part of the story, and not to be discouraged by this. We have to be boundary crossers, go beyond our ideas of what we think things should be. we have to be willing, in a sense, to go again into the nothing, into ourself, our inner space, lekaha, and we have to be spiritual warriors. Abraham was a spiritual warrior. He was a warrior, spiritual warrior. He was a shaman, clearly with the circumcision, willing to work on that level. So there's another message here, is that liberated people, this image, are multi-dimensional beings working on every level: physical, emotional, mental, spiritually. Shaman, which is more the astral plane energies, as well as being willing to go into the nothing and totally wake up. They're all parts of who we are. If we deny anyone and say, well, this is higher than that, we're missing the point. What's the point? As I define it, as we see with Abraham, multi-dimensional beings, functioning on all these levels, accepting all those parts of ourselves. So, may everyone be blessed and inspired by this Parsha VaYera, that we are take on the energies of the heroic spiritual warrior, mystical, shamanic, fully liberated energies of Abraham in our lives in the way that it comes to us. Shalom, shalom, shalom. And peace be with you. And sit and meditate with this for a little bit. I just gave a little bit of the transmission of energy, and hold on, I'm going to just do a little bit more. And now, go ahead. If you feel like it, go ahead into meditation and integrate all this. Amen. Shalom.